today, 50 years ago, the designation order for the AONB was presented to government, and so yeah, it's quite an auspicious day. So what I'm going to be talking on is a number of subjects, and I put 50,000 years of the Wye Valley as the first item. That should take us till about midnight, and then we'll be working through the rest of the topics. But actually, I hope we should be finished by 8:30 is the plan. That's including questions. So I put 50,000 years. We know that at least 20,000 years ago, people were living in King Arthur's Cave on the Doward. And certainly so the Paleolithic into the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, people were living throughout the Wye Valley and making use of its natural resources. And of course, there are plenty of hill forts throughout the Wye Valley. This is a depiction of Little Doward. And the Romans came through. The Wye became the border between Mercia and Gwent and the Welsh kingdoms. This is a depiction of Offa's Dyke along above where Tintern is now. And then, of course, the Normans came and built the castles throughout the area as well. Followed by the monks as the Cistercian monks that built Tintern Abbey. Following the monks came the industry. I mean, probably the monks were industrious themselves, or the people working around the abbeys were making good use of all the resources in the Wye, and indeed going back to Roman times, the mineral resources of the Forest of Dean were being worked. And so that industrialization of the Wye took place, and in some places that was very heavy industry and unrecognizable, I think we'd say today, although obviously some of you may have remembered Redbrook not quite looking like this, but as when there was still a tinplate factory there. What amazes me about so many of these images of the Wye Valley is the amount of river traffic on the amount of boats on the river. You don't get a feel really today of that bustle and that activity. And places like Brockwere were renowned for being dens of debauchery, and yeah, you can imagine all those dockers and people working in places like that, and the language and all sorts. Well, yes, would be unimaginable probably to the people visiting and living in Brockwere today. And that was all up and down the Wye. At the same time, in that sort of 17th, 18th century, the picturesque Wye tour started, and people came to appreciate these views. But probably really, we could say that, you know, for 20,000 years, people have been standing at Yat Rock and probably thinking, oh, that's a nice view. And so, yeah, people have been appreciating this valley for at least 20,000 years. Yes, right up into the to the modern era. But we have to remember, and this is a photograph from the 1950s. This is actually Cyril Fox's photos when he was surveying the Offa's Dyke. But have to realise how much the landscape has changed. You can see it in those pictures from the industrial era, but also here you notice how heavily the hillsides, what are now thickly forested, how they're completely shorn of trees. Would have been after the Second World War when most of the trees were cut down. And so when people say to me, oh, we want to preserve the Wye Valley just as it's always been. Well, it's never been like it is now. It's always changing. And that's one of the...
I'm going to say this, I know you'll have to listen to me for a minute rather than him, but...
Can somebody, Jackie, can you mute your device, please? Thanks. So, there's that's you'll be glad to hear is the 50,000 years of history in 10 minutes. So move on to the designation now, and what that means. The Wye Valley and the Forest of Dean, I should hasten to add, were first proposed to be national parks in the 1930s, and that was by Lord Blediscoe from Lydney, and the movement for creating national parks developed through the Second World War. The Dower report was produced in 1945, suggesting a series of national parks, and that was followed in 1947 by the Hobhouse report. And this is the map from the Hobhouse report, and you can see, I presume you can see my cursor moving. We've got the Forest of Dean and Wye Valley, as well as the Brecon Beacons, the Malvern Hills, but also, some might be interested, whole area of the Clun, Radnor forests, Plinlimmon, so most of the Cambrian mountains. And there was this proposal to have a division or a two levels of national parks and what were called conservation areas then. Obviously, conservation areas, the term moved on to be for the built environment. But the National Parks Committee that was set up following the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act, the 1949 Act, which established the legislation to designate national parks and what then became areas of outstanding natural beauty. They drew up this map in the 1950s for the Wye Valley. So if you can make out, Chepstow is at the bottom, Monmouth and Ross, and then Hereford at the top. And what's interesting today is that Ross, the AONB goes around Ross and around Monmouth, but it also goes around Cinderford, that takes in May Hill and Gorsley, Muchmarkle, Putley, and then is much more tightly drawn down the Wye on the western side, but also down in the southwest corner extends almost right down to Wentwood. So yeah, it's significantly different to where we've ended up today. What happened with the Forest of Dean had been designated a national forest park, the first forest park in the late 1930s. So the feeling was the Forest of Dean was well enough protected under the relatively new Forestry Commission, and so the decision was made to focus purely on the Wye Valley. So this was the boundaries proposed in the late 60s, and then that's the boundary that was designated in on this day, or was put forward for designation, for notification on this day 50 years ago. And those are the two designation orders. There are two because even then it was recognised needed a separate one for the Welsh side as for the English side. So actually the Wye Valley AONB is two AONBs that we manage seamlessly across the national border. So these, you can see, were finally signed off in December, the 13th of December 1971. So we look forward to hopefully holding some kind of event, and hopefully not on Zoom. Hopefully we can get together at in a hall or a hotel or something in December to celebrate that actual date on the 13th of December when the Wye Valley was officially designated an AONB. So that's what it looked like in 1971. That's what I looked like in 1971. So moving on, what is an AONB? Well,
you watch it, I'll bring the things in.
No, we'll do it together. Love.
If you could mute, please, that would be great. An area of outstanding natural beauty, it's an outstanding landscape whose distinctive character and natural beauty are so precious that it's safeguarded in the national interest. And national parks and AONBs are of equal landscape value, and they're created under the same legislation, so share the same level of planning protection as national parks, although we'll come on to the differences in a bit. And AONBs are managed jointly through a joint advisory committee, or some of them are conservation boards, some have joint committees and AONB partnerships. And so the Wye Valley is one of 46 in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and they're the sort of the orangey brown areas on the map that hopefully you can see. The sort of lighter green, lime green areas are the national parks. Although actually, hasten to add, South Downs is now also a national park. And obviously that's where we fit in, straddling the English-Welsh border. So the legislative context, as I said, the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act is the primary legislation, was followed up by the Countryside Act, and then the Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000, which established a couple of fundamental benefits or new legislation for the AONBs. The Section 85 put a duty on all relevant authorities to have regards to the purpose of AONBs. So that's everything from parish councils up to ministers of the Crown and organisations that are working for the government. And Section 85 made local authorities produce a management plan for the AONB, acting jointly if there's more than one local authority for that AONB, and to renew that plan every 5 years. And the legislation says that that plan formulates their policy for the management of the AONB and for the carrying out of their functions in it. So the primary purpose, as outlined in right back to the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act, is to conserve and enhance natural beauty, and that's the same for AONBs and for national parks. Subsequently, it was they were given subsidiary purposes to account for the needs of agriculture, forestry, and other rural industries, and to pay regard to the promoting sustainable forms of social and economic development, and that the demand for recreation should be met so far as this is consistent with natural beauty. National parks have secondary purposes to promote the enjoyment and understanding, so working much more on developing recreation, and also have a stronger social and economic imperative. And in terms of planning policy, AONBs and national parks are recognised in national policy, the National Planning Policy Framework and Planning Policy Wales, and in subsidiary guidance, which has references the AONB management plans. And then, of course, the local authorities have their core strategies and local development frameworks, which have AONB policies in them as well. And those usually also mention or reference the AONB management plan. And then there are also some permitted development rights that sometimes have specific references or derogations to AONBs. So that's really where the protection of the AONB comes from, through those planning policies. So what is natural beauty? Because that's the crux really for all of this. And the term natural beauty was first came into legislation with the National Trust in 1907. And the National Trust is actually called the National Trust for Places of Historic Interest and Natural Beauty. However, slightly bizarrely, the natural beauty wasn't defined initially in the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act, but it was confirmed in the Countryside Act of 1968 that it includes flora, fauna, geological and physiographical features. So you start to get the idea of the breadth and depth of natural beauty, and there was a subsequent refining in the Natural Environment Rural Communities Act in 2006, which added that it does include areas of agriculture and forestry, and features partly the result of human intervention, because there's been an argument about, well, if it's natural, then it can't be human made, which that disproved. And the Countryside Agency in 2001, the then Countryside Agency, established this definition that actually natural beauty encompasses pretty much everything, natural and human, that makes a distinctive geology, climate, soils, plants, animals, and communities. So that includes the archaeology and the building and the people that live in the area, past and present, and the perceptions of those who visit it. It's often that reference, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but it's also the landscape itself, and the landscape is a mixture of the nature and the culture that has created it. And those are all components that go into forming the natural beauty. So what I hope I'm going to be able to do now is show a brief film. If I excuse the technical exchange here. And again, Nick, if you can confirm that you're seeing and hearing this.
The Y.
I need to share that.
Valley is one of 4.
I can hear it, Andrew, but not see it.
So are you seeing me still? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try. No, you're still.
And I can see the start of the video now.
Okay, good. Well, let's play it. Hopefully you can hear it.
Yep.
The Wye Valley is one of 46 areas of outstanding natural beauty in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It was designated an area of outstanding natural beauty in 1971 to protect the special features that make it one of the finest lowland landscapes in Britain. There are 27 special qualities, including dramatic limestone gorges, native woodlands, impressive geology, a rich history of hill forts, castles, and a Cistercian abbey. Together, these special qualities create a sense of place and identity that makes the Wye Valley an area of outstanding natural beauty. The Wye Valley AONB covers 58 miles of the lower reaches of the River Wye. The river itself has been designated a special area of conservation and is a site of special scientific interest for its entire length. 27% of the AONB is woodland, more than twice the UK average. Nearly half of the Wye Valley woodlands are publicly owned or have public access, creating amazing spaces to explore. And with more than 2,300 veteran trees, you will never be far from one. 15% of the AONB is unimproved or semi-improved grassland, and our traditional meadows are awash with colourful wildflowers in spring and early summer. There are over 70 historic viewpoints, several being scheduled monuments, such as the Eagle's Nest, found in the picturesque landscape park at Piercefield. 2 long-distance trails pass through the AONB, the Wye Valley Walk and the Offers Dyke Path National Trail. The AONB works to conserve and enhance all these special qualities through the management plan, which details the nature and condition of each quality, identifying changes or threats to them, as well as showing how they contribute to the ecosystem of the area. Discover and explore the 27 special qualities to really appreciate the Wye Valley's outstanding natural beauty.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. We will be obviously making that available online shortly. And yes, and also this talk hopefully will be going online too. I just lost myself again. Sorry. I need to get back to sharing. Are you seeing the presentation again, Nick, or not?
I can see it, but not full screen. There it is. No, it's full screen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's okay. That's makes that.
Yes, that's good. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So
Yeah.
so yes, we've covered 50,000 years of the Wye Valley, what the designation is, or what the designation history is, what the AONB is, and now we move on to how the AONB is managed, how we're managed in the Wye Valley, and then we'll move on to what we do, yeah, as the AONB unit. So just firstly, looking briefly at the makeup of the AONB. It, as I said, we straddle the English-Welsh border, so we're 2/3 in England and 1/3 in Wales. So we've got the two countries, the 4 local authorities, with the Forest of Dean District Council in Gloucestershire. So that's covering 40 town, parish and community councils throughout the area. A population of just under 30,000, but of course with Chepstow, Monmouth, Ross and Colford. Well, Ross is predominantly in the AONB, but the other towns around and the city of Hereford just outside, so it's about 100,000 people within 5 miles. And of course, with Birmingham, Bristol, Cardiff all being within an hour's drive, there's a good 2.5 million people within an hour's drive of the area. So administratively, it's quite complex, dealing with England and Wales and all the different local authorities. But it also gives us a rich mix of the, let's say, the healthy competition between Gloucestershire and Herefordshire and Monmouthshire, because they all have their own beliefs in which rugby teams are best to support and which drinks are best to drink and so on and so forth. But they all focus on the Wye as being very proud to be part of the Wye Valley. So the areas, 126 square miles, 327 square kilometres. 65% of that is farmland, and as the video said, 27% is woodland. So 92 kilometres, 58 miles of the river. So it's about 1/3 of the River Wye in total. And the river, most of, or a large chunk, 1,000 hectares of the woodlands are special areas of conservation, as well as a series of lesser and greater horseshoe bat roost sites. And a lot of those are sites of special scientific interest. And then there are scheduled monuments, a large number of those, which include Offa's Dyke and the castles and, well, a whole range of historic monuments. 17 conservation areas. As we said, the Wye Valley itself was going to be a conservation area originally, but conservation areas are mostly the villages, listed buildings, and that tourism heritage going back over 250 years. So we did a survey in 2017 and in fact in 2011 as well, and we'll look to repeat it again later this year, asking the same questions. But in 2017, we asked the designation of the Wye Valley AONB has significantly helped conserve and enhance the natural beauty of the area. Do you agree? You know, the format: agree strongly, agree, neither agreed on this, etc., etc. And glad to say 96% of people agreed agreed strongly that the designation had significantly helped the area. So how do we manage it? What are the structures, the bodies? We have a joint advisory committee that Councillor Anne Webb is the chair of, and that's supported by technical officers working party from the local authorities and government agencies. We have the small AONB unit that Nick and I are part of, and then we build up projects, and some of those have steering groups, topic groups, and other things. We'll come on to some of those in a minute. So that's another way of interpreting the structure. The Joint Advisory Committee working down through to direct and instruct what we do as an AONB unit. So that every year we do a tour. Well, we didn't last year, of course, but usually we do a tour, and that's a picture of the Joint Advisory Committee and various other associates, actually at Harewood End Park. So membership of the JAC is made up with county councillors and district councillors, and then parish community council representatives, the landowner and farming representatives from CLA and NFU, and the county voluntary conservation representatives, and then some co-opted members as well, representing different interest groups. So hopefully in there we feel that we've got a good spread of representation of interests right across the area from the 3 counties, and yeah, conservation, landowning, recreation. And as I said, yeah, the officers in support from the local authorities and the government agencies. So again, in that survey we did, we said the JAC has significantly influenced the conservation and enhancement of the area. And again, you know, good to see nearly 60% of people agreeing or agreeing strongly that the JAC has some influence. And remember, the A in the JAC stands for advisory, so it is only an advisory committee. So it's advising the local authorities and other bodies of what needs to be done in the area. And then we come to the management plan, which is really the core document for the area. And we've just finalised the next 5-year plan. And it's a light touch review of the previous or the existing plan. And we will be working on that over the next 5 years to deliver that. So that becomes the foundation for any funding and any projects and any activity we're doing, and also we use that to measure planning applications and project proposals throughout the area. And then we have my team,
here's Ruth.
A modest team, I would say,
yes.
In that we're small but perfectly formed, and we try and do as much as we can for as many people as possible. The funding primarily for the core team and the projects we deliver comes primarily from the government agencies, so DEFRA, Natural Resources Wales, and the Sustainable Development Fund from Welsh Government, with matching contribution to the government grants from the local authorities. And then we draw in other income from other projects, other funding sources, and levering in from other contributions, match funding to the Sustainable Development Fund. So these are for the previous financial year, 2019 to 2020, and we had that income made up just under just over £500,000 of budget. And so again, that's spent on that sort of core funding obviously goes on the staff unit, and then the rest of it is going on projects and initiatives throughout the area. So there are four parts to what is the AONB. There's the line on the map, the designation itself. And people say, oh, well, the AONB does this. Well, the AONB is really, it's a line on a map. It's a designation. What levers the action is the management plan and the Joint Advisory Committee and the AONB unit. And with those three parts and the designation itself and the planning policies around that and so on and so forth, that's how we lever the action and help conserve and enhance the area, which of course is the purpose of the designation. So what do we do with that money, with that leverage, that power to convene across England and Wales, to collaborate with all those partners? Well, I mean, we work with volunteers. We've got a good core of volunteers who do a huge amount of work across the area, and you know, we're very grateful always for all their help. And of course, they're all very frustrated, like we all are at the moment, of not being able to get out as much as we would want and not being able to socialise and get stuff done. So in the past, about 10 years ago, we did a major survey of the veteran trees, again, using volunteers. Oh, that jumped on. I think in that video it mentioned over 2,000 veteran trees identified throughout the Wye Valley. So truly national resource and really important special quality. Again, nearly 10 years ago now, we did the Overlooking the Wye Landscape Partnership Scheme of £3 million project conserving and enhancing all the historic viewpoints and a lot of the industrial sites. So we're able to pull together those sorts of projects and initiatives. And worked with the Environment Agency and others on the river, and working with the Wye Navigation Advisory Committee and all the canoeing organisations to help the enjoyment and enhancing the understanding of the use of the river. And then many of you will be familiar with the Wye Valley River Festival that we've now run 4 festivals covering the whole length of the AONB with all sorts of different artistic activities, outdoor theatre, outdoor arts. And again, had to reimagine that completely last year and do it online. I think we were very pleased with what we managed to achieve, turning it into a digital and online festival, but we really have enjoyed putting out these artistic events for people to experience out in the landscape and to really have a deepened experience. And that draws in all sorts of additional funding. Arts Council more lottery and sponsorship from different organisations. So is a really diverse initiative. We're looking at how to carry that forward with the artistic team, Desperate Men and Philippa Haynes from Bristol on taking the River Festival forward. We run the Sustainable Development Fund I mentioned. That's a delegated fund from Welsh Government, and it's for community initiatives and really anything that helps benefit the local communities and conserving and enhancing and sustainably developing the area. So if you have projects or ideas, do get in touch with us. Sarah Sawyer, our Community Links Officer, deals with the applications. And next financial year, we have £100,000 to offer out as grants. So I'm afraid only accessible on the Welsh side. On the English side, we have a smaller fund through the Herefordshire Community Foundation. So again, do get in touch if you've got project ideas or proposals. And even if we can't fund them through these grants, we may be able to direct you to other opportunities. For several years now, we've run a Youth Rangers programme that's helping 14 to 16-year-olds on a 2-year programme of activities, really getting to understand what happens in a landscape, all the activities, and Kate Humble's been the patron for the Youth Rangers. So again, if you know any teenagers you think they could all get out the house more at the moment, but we will be restarting the Youth Rangers programme in the summer as soon as we are able. Walking, of course, is a huge activity in the Wye Valley, and we help promote and publicise the Wye Valley Walk as one of the main routes in the area, and also promote other walks routes and work with the Walkers Are Welcome towns to build up guided walks and walking festivals and things like that, and really help people to get out and appreciate and enjoy the area. And we've now been running the AONB Farming Awards for 12 years. Again, weren't able to hold it last year, but it's a way that we can reward farmers and recognise the excellent work that they do. And we were very pleased that the Rudges from Ballingham Farm, who've won the Farming Award 3 times, were also awarded the Farmers Weekly Farmer of the Year Award recently. So those are the kind of farmers that we really want to nurture and work with and keep managing the land and yeah, doing outstanding work in an outstanding landscape. And we're looking forward shortly to a new programme called Farming in Protected Landscapes being launched on the English side, that should enable us to work even more closely with farmers and landowners to conserve and enhance the area. And then Mindscapes is a project that we've run for a number of years, initially with big lottery funding. It's now managed separately by Artspace Cinderford and through the Foresters Forest project. It's been working with people suffering from dementia and their carers, and giving them the opportunity to reconnect with the landscape, and people who have been, for whatever reasons, have been losing that opportunity and that ability to to connect with a landscape that probably they've known and loved and been in all their lives. So it's partly artistic, very creative, and getting people to, giving them opportunities to rekindle their connection. And as I said, I mentioned about walking, also linking in with public transport, and we're currently working with Monmouthshire County Council on looking at the transport and active travel opportunities across all the villages in the Monmouthshire part of the AONB. So we're looking forward to the outcomes of that in the next couple of months. But we produced a Walk This Why booklet a number of years ago, and linking public transport with walks that people can do, and the towns and villages. And as I said, also work closely with the Walkers Are Welcome towns. There's a couple of initiatives that we're also party to, or under that Section 85 duty that public bodies have. The Ofgem that control the electricity suppliers, they have turned to to Western Power, who supply your mains voltage, your mains electricity, or they manage the infrastructure that supplies that, and have said that they need to dedicate a certain amount of their funding to enhancing the landscape. So that's undergrounding power lines where they're in iconic places. So you can see here a couple of examples, one up behind the Kim Inn along the Offansdyke Path, and another in front of Goodrich Castle, where through that scheme we've been able to underground, or we've helped Western Power underground the power lines. And Nick manages that element and is working through a long list of new proposals that come through recently. And we're glad to say we've got a good pipeline of projects, but we know it way exceeds the available resource at the moment. But it's definitely good to show to Ofgem and to Western Power that there is demand and there is ongoing need for that. Another scheme we're working on is similarly National Grid are looking to how they can enhance their infrastructure. And so in that zone where the pylons go through sort of Cowton, Walford, across to Marstow, what mitigation opportunities are there in that zone? It's incredibly difficult to pinpoint what's the most appropriate, but later this year we will be working on that further and looking at funding opportunities from National Grid to try and enhance the mitigation of these large structures. Not an easy task, but a challenge that we want to grasp. And then in the last couple of years, we've been running a natural flood management project, initially on the Welsh side. We've been doing some initial work in the Valley Brook, so that's down through from Colford, Newland down to Redbrook. And I'm glad to say natural flood management is increasing in relevance, and the understanding of it is broadening amongst landowners and policymakers. And so we hope we will be able to continue our building our expertise and knowledge and to build up further projects to deliver more of this work, which helps enhance habitats. It reduces flooding and can resolve all sorts of issues, or help resolve all sorts of issues with water runoff and erosion. And then there's a broad range of habitat work that we're able to give advice on and assist either with funding or sometimes with the project work and with volunteers. We've done with Ross Town Council some riverside revetment and enhancement work, and also been working in the Lower Wye with the Wye and Usk Foundation and with the local landowners and individuals on control of invasive non-native species, so particularly Himalayan balsam and, well, particularly Japanese knotweed, and yes, turning to the ever-present Himalayan balsam. And again, when we're all able to get back out into the countryside and get working more fully with volunteers, then we hope we can start to make inroads on the spread of Himalayan balsam. But certainly we've been tackling Japanese knotweed wherever we can find it. And if you know stands that are of Japanese knotweed, do let us know, and we will be looking at, again, for resources to control that. For a number of years, we were fortunate enough, again, initially with lottery money, to be able to host trainee surveyors and trainee ecologists, and they were able to go out and survey the countryside. So we have a nearly complete, what's called a phase 1 habitat map of the AONB. About 85% of the AONB is now covered with the phase 1 habitat map. Sadly, we don't have that trainee program anymore, but it would be, well, great. We would be looking at opportunities to try and get that sort of scheme running again, to get the next generation. It's a sort of logical step after the youth rangers, really, to help train up young professionals in environmental management and ecology and surveying skills and that sort of thing. So again, in that 2017 survey, we'd asked what people thought of the AONB unit activities. And again, you can see over 90% of people felt the achievements were good or very good. So, you know, that's a huge vindication for myself and the team, Nick and Sarah and Ruth and Sharon and Nikki. And so, yeah, really pleased with that. And that emphasizes, you know, the collaborative work we do with the partners, for instance, with the Wye and Usk Foundation, and we've been working closely with them through Water Environment Grant, and had 2 catchment advisors working with us, advising farmers and landowners throughout the area. And so that reach and that achievement goes right throughout, working with the wildlife trusts and government agencies, the towns, parish, community councils. So, you know, our work is always trying to keep the place outstandingly natural and beautiful, and working with all the landowners and all the people that work there, and have that influence and that power where we don't. We really just have the power to convene and the power to access and lever funding where possible. So that's my final slide. And so I hope you found that interesting and informative. And I will stop sharing my screen there. And hopefully Nick has been collating questions, and I will happily answer any questions that are there. I just stop sharing that. And
Okay.
yes, so I haven't been monitoring the chat.
Right. Well, we've had a few questions come in.
Jolly good. Far away.
We've had a few questions come in. The first one I'll ask straight up, because hopefully we'll be able to answer it quite quickly. So Susan's asked if the presentation will be shared afterwards, and if so, can we share it amongst the local community?
Yes, we have been recording this, so yeah, we will be sharing. We will hopefully be putting it on a website, the Valley AONB.org.uk website, so we can let you all know when it is available, and yeah, so you'll be able to watch it and direct people towards it.
Great. Right.
I'm struggling to hear you, Nick.
Mute yourself. Great, thank you. Right, the next one is. I'm getting quite a long delay. This is frustrating.
That's better. Yeah.
Is Stuart Carswell able to unmute himself to ask Andrew about the AONB border?
Yeah. Hi, Andrew. Yes, I had a question about the boundary for the AONB. So you showed a map early on from the 1930s of the proposed boundary originally, and it included a large part of the Forest of Dean. I was wondering what the potential would be to alter the current AONB boundaries to include more of the Forest of Dean in future. Is that something which is possible, or is that something which is being looked at, or is the boundary sort of fixed where it is?
No, that's a really good question, Stuart. Thanks. Yes, I think it's fair to say the Forest of Dean is kind of unfinished business. It is has definitely been looked at. I mean, about 15 years ago, there was a big study by the then Countryside Agency, and they very nearly decided to turn it into an AONB, and certainly the Forest of Dean is on is fairly high up a long list that Natural England now have to look at next designations, and they are I think they're currently looking at a boundary modification on the Surrey Hills. They've recently been looking at a boundary modification to the Suffolk Coasts and Heaths AONB. It's interesting because Natural England seem to be taking kind of 4, maybe 5 years on each of these boundary modifications. And so if we said that the Forest of Dean was maybe, you know, 3rd or 4th on their list, well, that means it's going to be 15, 20 years before they get round to, you know, the government agency responsible gets round to looking at the Forest of Dean again. that's just my kind of personal view and observation. But certainly, as you can see from that, yeah, the Forest of Dean was earmarked for a national park in the 1930s. It wasn't designated when the Wye Valley was, 50 years ago. It's still sitting there, and some might argue it's getting more beautiful as the industrial heritage sort of, I suppose, becomes a more distant memory. But that's probably all I should say, because the Forest of Dean, or most of it, isn't part of my jurisdiction. There's I suppose the other thing to say is, if you looked westwards on that map from the 1950s, there were other areas that were also there, identified that hadn't yet been designated. Okay, thank you. Nick.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Next one. We've got another 9 questions to get through, if we get through them all. So it's a couple of minutes per question, I'm afraid, Andrew.
Okay.
Right then. The next question is about the makeup of the JAC, and particularly farming representation from Henry and Esther Rudge. So if you ask your question.
Hello, Andrew. Esther here.
Hi.
My question is about the makeup of the JAC. With 65% of the land being in the AONB being in farmland, you've only got about 10% of the JAC as farmers. Just seems a little bit disproportionate.
Yeah, that's a good yes, a good assessment. I think certainly yes. I mean, the NFU and CLA, and actually NFU Wales and NFU Cymru are also represented on there. But yes, when you toss it up like that, I think that's a reasonable accusation, perhaps, that we could or should look at that. There's, I mean, we did a review of the JAC a number of years ago, and we are waiting to see what the recommendations are. A couple of years ago, there was a big review of AONBs nationally, chaired by Julian Glover, so generally called the Glover Review on the English side. We're still waiting for the government's response on that, and whether there will be a greater push to review the representation and membership of the JAC. I won't say necessarily that'll be purely in the direction of farmers, because there are other demands or requests as well. But no, your point is well made and well noted, Esther. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, Nick, next one.
Okay, on to the next one. Again, it's about the next one's about the JAC as well, and people's awareness of it. So Val Long, if you could unmute yourself if you'd like to, and ask Andrew.
Yes, good evening. It's good to really good talk and very interesting. The survey that you showed, I think it was 2017, illustrated that there was quite a proportion of people that just didn't know about the JAC. And obviously, there's all the exciting and high profile things that you do in the AONB. And I know that the workings of the JAC can be perhaps a little boring at times. But would it not be useful to get some of that information on a regular basis into the local press and other media, so that people know in a regular way what's going on within the AONB?
Yes, thanks, Val. And I know that you have sat through many JAC meetings yourself, so you know how scintillating they can be.
Yeah, they can be dry, yes.
It's one of those things, isn't it? It's you know, communications and PR is always a challenge, and we try and get as much information out as we can, but yeah, we can always do more, do better, and that then, yeah, even when we think we're doing everything, people come back and say, oh, we didn't know this, or we've never heard about that, and you think, well, how do you reach those hard to reach groups and individuals? And it, I mean, it's almost harder nowadays with social media because there are so many different channels and people get their information from different places to target and market what we do in ways that get the right messages across to the right people. I mean, I think all I can say is we do as much as we can with our modest team, but yes, there is always more, and getting that balance between what can be quite boring and mundane or quite complicated as well, against all the excitement. And as we've found, sometimes we advertise or make known an opportunity, and then we get this huge response of interest that most of it we can't actually deal with because it's, you know, way beyond our control or way beyond the capacity of to deal with. So it's a balance of expectations about over achievability. But yeah, communications is always a challenge.
Thank you.
Thanks, Val.
Okay, the next one, this is a interesting question from Andrew Delahaye about dark skies. Andrew, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
It's actually not Andrew, sorry, Nick, it's Yolandi here. I was just wondering, is it possible for the Wye Valley AONB to have a dark skies policy? It's something that I'm very aware of as a ward councillor, that the planning conditions are put on to new houses that are built or porches and whatever, but after they get sold, you know, the properties get sold, more and more people seem to be putting on high-powered lighting, external lighting onto their properties. So how is it possible to put a dark skies policy through the AONB, the Wye Valley AONB?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be becoming a bigger and bigger challenge. Certainly in the new management plan, we have got more of a statement on yeah, dark skies and appropriate lighting. Actually, this afternoon I was in a meeting with the Welsh AONBs, and we were talking about the need to get better guidance, and the AONBs and national parks in North Wales are working closely together on better guidance. And we were saying about how we could be sharing and developing that more broadly. And certainly some AONBs across the country, across England and Wales, have developed dark sky policies. So it's something we're dipping our toe into, in a sense, but I think you're right. I think there's need to come up with some more effective guidance, but it's also because what we were talking about is, you know, we need to get to the retailers who are selling a lot of these lights that aren't fit for purpose, really, because or the guidance that goes with selling of these light fittings should be directing people how to install them properly. And yeah, we obviously can control some stuff. The planning authorities can control some lighting, but it's a tricky area because it doesn't necessarily come to light from a from a planning application. So we will certainly be looking at what we can do over the coming implementation of this management plan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
Okay, the next question we've got is about planning applications. So Bridget Vine, if you happy to unmute yourself to ask Andrew your question.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and hello, Andrew. Yeah, given that you're all employed by local authorities within the AONB unit, are you able to comment on planning applications within the AONB area? And if so, how on earth do you decide which ones you might comment on? And are you able to say typically how many perhaps are received within the AONB area in a year, and how many you are able to comment on? Thank you. Yeah, no, good question. I mean, we do monitor the planning applications. We get somewhere in the region of sort of 500, 600, 700 each year across the whole AONB. We do look at those, and on average, we probably look at about 10% of those applications, because most of them are small, yeah, things like, you know, rear extensions on properties, or small things like that. That, you know, what I would be looking for in a planning application that would be of concern to me, and again, this is written into the management plan, is if something's going to have significant detrimental impact on the AONB. So that if I think that may be the case, then that's what would trigger me to call it up, look it up on the system, and have a look at it in a bit more detail. And we use some planning consultants on a call-off basis that I can draw on them to have a look at it as well, to give me a sort of added perspective. In reality, we probably only comment on maybe a dozen or so each year. So, you know, we're talking about 1% of planning applications are the ones that actually we comment on. Now, of course, the planning authority are looking at all those planning applications, and they are judging those planning applications against the planning policies, the AONB policies that the local authority has. So to a greater extent, I'm relying on the planning officers doing a robust job of implementing the planning policies, and we do liaise quite closely with case officers sometimes on you know, specific applications. There are times when I have had to disagree, sometimes with even the landscape officer in a local authority, and yes, there are times when I've you know, objected to planning applications in the local authority that hosts my post, but it is understood and recognised that the Wye Valley AONB is a semi-autonomous section, and therefore we have the ability to that sort of freedom and autonomy to comment on the applications. But we try and do it as much as possible in a supportive way, and do it as officers where we can. But like I said, I'm quite happy to take the liberty to object to a planning application
if I'm really concerned that it's going to have a significant detrimental impact on the AONB. And I would use the management plan to guide me on that.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thanks. Nick.
Okay, the next question, Andrew, is about our phase 1 data and its availability. So Alistair, if you'd like to elaborate on that.
Yeah, just a quick question on the phase 1 map that you mentioned briefly and had up on the screen. I was just wondering if that would be made publicly available, or if it already is publicly available, or if it could be shared if not.
Yeah, at the moment it's not completely publicly available, because sometimes to gain access to the land we have to ask, we try and do as much of it as possible from public rights of way, but obviously not all the land is sort of visible or accessible from public rights of way, so sometimes we have to ask the landowner for permission to get onto their land, and then sometimes there are you know, constraints, conditions around that level of access. So we're not able to say, you know, all of the data is completely sort of free to view. What we are offering farmers and landowners at the moment is access that we can give farmers and landowners a copy of that data for their land, and if it's not complete, then also we can go on or request to go on and survey their land for them, and that's particularly to help with sort of future countryside stewardship, or preparing for the environmental land management scheme when that comes into effect. So yeah, really trying to give farmers and landowners the best information that certainly we've got available and that we're able to share with them. You know, if you're interested either for a project or an initiative, or as a landowner, then do get in touch with us, and we should certainly be able to look at what the information is we've got for that site, and yeah, whether we're able to share it with you or not.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Okay, Andrew, 4 more to go.
That's
this next one, yes, this next one I'm going to ask. So quickly, Andy has asked about river pollution and what are we doing about it? What are we able to do about it? Have we any plans to tackle pollution in the river?
Yes, a difficult one to deal with in 30 seconds. It's unfortunately, really, most of the worst amount of most of the pollution is flowing down into the AONB. As I said, you know, we cover about the bottom third of the River Wye, and that's the bottom of a huge catchment, which takes in, you know, most of North Herefordshire, yeah, the Lug, and up into mid Wales, and all of that pollution is then channeling down and funneling down into the Wye, you know, into the AONB, and then obviously flushing out into the Severn and the Atlantic. So to a certain extent, we're not able to control what's coming downstream to us. But that's where we're working with the Wye and Usk Foundation, and obviously the Environment Agency, Natural England, the local authorities, Natural Resources Wales, and there's a Wye Nutrient Management Board hosted by Herefordshire Council. Those are the bodies that are really responsible and fully exercised in trying to address that with Welsh Water and the NFU and yeah, all those bodies that really are able to exert some influence. So we're doing our bit, that what we can in the AONB, again, working with farmers and landowners and the natural flood management project, things like that. But unfortunately, most of it, we're the recipients of it coming down into the AONB, and difficult to deal with it ourselves when it's coming through us, as it were. That's a very swift answer. We could spend the whole evening discussing that in itself, and there are other forums that do that.
Okay, the next one may be equally as difficult to answer in a short space of time. It's about proposed Shires National Park. So Mark Wilmot, if you're happy to unmute yourself and see how quickly Andrew can answer this.
Yeah, I can. I think you've got about a minute, Andrew. Hi, I really enjoyed your talk. Thank you very much. I think I've asked you this question before, but I just thought in this forum it'd be useful to put to you. I know some of us have been approached by a couple of Malvern Hills district councillors about linking Malvern Hills AONB with the Wye Valley one, following the principles of the Rogers Review, which you mentioned earlier on. And actually, they were thinking also of bringing in quite a lot of the Monmouthshire, Herefordshire borders and all of the Forest of Dean. I believe it was very ambitious. Herefordshire Council's cabinet were very supportive of it. Then COVID came and it's kind of gone on a back burner, but it hasn't been forgotten. Do you have a view on it, and would you like to comment on it, although I accept obviously very briefly, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I mean, it comes back to a certain extent to that previous question that Stuart asked about the Forest of Dean. You know, there is definitely unfinished business. You know, and the Glover Review recognised that, you know, potentially we could say that not all, you know, the designating AONBs is not finished yet. And so then you come back to, as I was saying to Stuart, you know, how long is it taking to deal with the acknowledged, you know, the existing list of designations, and therefore, you know, where on the list is this new proposal, because that wasn't on the list that was put in the Glover Review. And so, you know, if it's a fresh proposal and it's going on the bottom of a list of, you know, a dozen or 20 or so areas, and it's taking 5 years for each of those, well, you know, I fear we might all be long gone before that ever reaches the top of the list. So it's difficult to say. There's, you know, and of course the other thing then is assessing that landscape, and does all of it reach the criteria? As you saw at the beginning, you know, the boundary of the Wye Valley in evolving towards being designated shifted and wobbled significantly. So, you know, anyone that ultimately draws the line has to make sure that what you know, has to justify where they are drawing that line. So all I can say is I'm glad it won't be me having to draw that line.
Okay, thanks.
Final two, we've got Ewan Grant has asked about youth rangers. Could you say a little bit more about youth rangers? Do you work with school to recruit people? If I've missed anything out there, Ewan, please unmute yourself and pipe up. Otherwise,
I think you've nailed it, Andrew. I'd just ask a little bit more. I guess it was interesting, and I guess keeping the youth involved is really important. So how do you do that? Do you go to schools? Are you using some of the clubs in the forest schools that some of the primary schools are doing? That would be interesting. Over.
Yes, thanks, Ewan. Yeah, certainly. I mean, Sarah goes around it's primarily the youth rangers, obviously, is pitched at secondary age. So she goes around the local secondary schools to drum up support or, you know, interest. It is a program that children join, and it's was intended as a 2-year program for each cohort. So it's, you know, we're only able to take on about 15 or 20 people, young people each cohort. You know, there's just limits to our own capacity on that. But we also do work with the primary schools, and yeah, there's a whole range of things. And we used to do, you know, be heavily involved in the forest schools in the early days of the initiative. And again, the grant funding, Sustainable Development Fund on the Welsh side, we've used to support school projects and initiatives like that. So yeah, and you know, school groups coming out. Obviously, we'd love to be able to support and endorse more you know, field trips out into the countryside, and always looking at resourcing opportunities for that. So yeah, we do as much as we can with the schools, primaries and secondaries in the area. And I'd say if you're interested or want more information, do get in touch with Sarah Sawyer, whose details will be on our website. And yeah, talk to her.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and one final question, and it's a nice one to finish on, I think. This is Alice Thomas, and she asks you, Andrew, if you could pick your favourite part of the Wye Valley AONB, where would you choose?
Yeah, excellent one. Well, I'm sure every one of us have got our secret favourite sites. I think, well, funnily enough, I think it's what I started and finished with. It'll be Little Doward, King Arthur's Cave, you know, around there. And of course, you can expand that out to include Biblins and even Yat Rock. I mean, the walk, you know, I take visitors down to Simmons Yat, and you get the hand ferry across, walk down to Biblins and back. That's a completely unique experience in this country. You know, you can have dozens of wire bridges like that in New Zealand, and there are obviously more dramatic limestone gorges elsewhere in the world. But to be able to get a hand ferry across, walk down, go across a wire spring bridge and back, and then have a pint, you know, is fantastic experience. But taking, you know, we used to take our kids up to King Arthur's Cave and on up to Little Doward. And yeah, that's just magical. So that's one place. 365 Steps, another amazing place. You know, always expect orcs and things to jump out at you when you always go down 365 steps, don't go up it. There's hundreds of places that I love in the Wye Valley, which is why it's such a lovely, you know, it's such an honor to work and have, you know, feel like having some influence on the place. Yeah. It's an outstanding landscape. It's all lovely. So I think
that's it, Andrew. Thank you. Well done.
Good. Well, I'd just like to thank everyone. I know some people have had to leave. We've gone over by 7 or 8 minutes. But I just thank you all really for as Anne said at the beginning, for giving your time this evening, for bearing with me, listening to me and my clunky management of the software and hardware. And yeah, I know many of you are actively involved in managing parts of the Wye Valley, and so, you know, keep up the good work is what I would say. And yeah, thank you for joining us this evening, and we will be looking at doing more throughout the year as lockdown eases. We've got some social media takeovers going on, so have a look out for that, and yeah, and keep an eye on Facebook, social media, and on our website for more information. And please feel free to get in touch with us if you you know, got any queries. So thank you all very much. I will wish you all good night and safe speed. Not that you've probably got very far to go. And yeah, keep up the good work in conserving and enhancing our beloved Wye Valley.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I think there's five of us left.
Yep. Jolly good, Nick. Thank you. Or let's stop recording as well.